What happens when a mother walks into court carrying a 17-day-old baby, an eviction notice folded inside a diaper bag, and the kind of look that tells you she has already run out of places to fall? Before I tell you what Judge Caprio said, hit that subscribe button if you believe mercy still belongs in justice. Because this story starts with a parking ticket and ends with a courtroom moment millions would never forget. At 9:14 on a rainy Thursday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, Courtroom B was supposed to be moving through ordinary municipal cases. Meter violations, registration holds, unpaid fees, the kind of paperwork that makes people stare at the floor and mumble their names into a microphone. But then the side door opened, and every head in the room turned at once. A young woman in a faded old navy denim jacket stepped in with a black Graco diaper bag over one shoulder and a baby wrapped in a pale blue Carter's blanket pressed against her chest. Her hair was pulled into a crooked bun like she had done it in the dark. Her sneakers were white once, not now. She wore no makeup, no jewelry except a thin hospital bracelet she had forgotten to remove, and in her left hand she held a crumpled orange notice with the words 5-day demand for possession printed across the top. Drop a comment telling us the first thing you would do if you saw a mother walk into court like that, because nobody in that room was ready for what came next. The baby made a small sound, not quite a cry, more like a shaky squeak, the kind newborns make when their whole body is still learning how to be in the world. The sound was soft, but in that courtroom it cut through everything. Even the clerk stopped typing. Judge Frank Caprio looked down over his glasses, then leaned forward. He had seen every kind of face in that courtroom over the years. Angry faces, guilty faces, faces that lied badly and faces that told the truth too late. But this one was different. It was pride fighting panic in real time. The clerk called the case. City of Providence versus Elena Morales. Docket PVD 26 MV 11847 and PVD 26 MV 12203. Elena Morales, 27 years old. Address listed as 48 Willow Street, Apartment 3B, Olneyville. Vehicle, 2012 Toyota Corolla LE Silver, Rhode Island plate HN 472. Violations: 2 expired meter tickets, 1 no parking zone citation outside women and infants hospital, 1 tow fee, 1 administrative late penalty, 1 registration hold. Like this video, if you believe some cases are never just about the paper in front of the judge. Sometimes they are about the life hanging behind it. Elena didn't start with sympathy. She started hard. "You can just say whatever amount it is," she said before Caprio even got through the file. "I already know how this goes." The room shifted. A few people in the gallery glanced at each other. That tone, that edge, that armor people wear when they've been disappointed so many times that hope starts to feel embarrassing. Judge Caprio didn't react. He folded his hands, calm, still, the kind of stillness that makes other people hear themselves more clearly. "Ms. Morales," he said, "I haven't said a word yet." She swallowed, but her jaw stayed tight. "No disrespect, Your Honor. I'm just trying to save time." "Sometimes saving time costs you the truth," he said. That line alone would have been enough for a clip, but the room didn't know yet that the real story hadn't even started. He looked toward the baby. "How old is your little one?" 17 days. "And his name?" "Mateo." The baby stirred again, his tiny hand slipping free of the blanket. A hospital censor mark still faintly circled his heel. Caprio's eyes dropped to the orange paper sticking out of the diaper bag. "What's that notice?" Elena hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the handle. "Nothing." "If it was nothing," he said gently, "you wouldn't be holding it that hard." A whisper moved through the courtroom. Share this with someone who needs to see what happens when one honest question changes an entire room. Because the moment she handed him that paper, everything changed. Alina walked to the bench with slow, heavy steps and passed the notice to the clerk, Frank Bianchi, a former Marine with silver hair and the kind of face that usually looked carved out of granite. He unfolded it, read the top line, and his expression changed in a way that made the first row of the gallery lean forward. "Your Honor," Frank said quietly, "this is an eviction demand, effective tomorrow at noon if the balance isn't paid." Now the whole room was silent. Not courtroom quiet, human quiet, the kind that happens when strangers stop being strangers for 1 second. Caprio looked back at Alina. "You're here on parking matters. Why are you also facing eviction?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because tickets turn into fees, fees turn into holds, holds make you miss work, missing work turns into rent, rent turns into that." She pointed at the paper. "You have counsel." "No, I can barely afford formula." The prosecutor for the city, Assistant Solicitor Nina Mercer, adjusted the stack of files in front of her. She was competent, polished, maybe 35, navy suit, hair in a low twist, the kind of lawyer who lived by deadlines and line items. She glanced at the case summary, then at the baby, and for the first time that morning even she looked unsettled. Caprio opened the file. "The total due here is $612.80, including tow and penalties." Alina gave a tired nod. "Might as well be $6 million. Then Frank Bianchi cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said, holding up a second sheet from the folder, "there's also a boot authorization request if the balance remains unpaid by Friday." The gallery gasped, not loud, sharp, collective, a sound that told you everybody understood what a boot on that Corolla would mean. Because without that car, Alina Morales wasn't getting to her part-time shift at Harbor Bean Cafe on Atwells Avenue. She wasn't getting her 6-year-old daughter Sophia to school. She wasn't getting newborn Mateo back to his pediatric follow-up on Chalkstone. And if she couldn't do those things, the eviction notice in the diaper bag stopped being a threat. It became a countdown. That was the first cliffhanger, and the room could feel it like a storm front. Judge Caprio leaned back and studied her. "Tell me from the beginning." Alina exhaled through her nose like she had been holding that breath for weeks. "From the beginning." "Yes." "You don't want the whole thing." "Try me." She looked down at Mateo, then back up. Something in her face shifted. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe exhaustion so complete it had nowhere left to hide. "It started February 26th, she said. 3:14 in the morning. My water broke 5 weeks early. My neighbor, Mr. Abuelo from downstairs, drove me in his red Honda Odyssey because my Corolla wouldn't start in the cold. My daughter Sophia was asleep at my mother's place. Mateo came out not breathing right. They took him straight to NICU. I didn't hold him until after sunrise." Her voice caught, then flattened again. "I had a C-section. They sent me home before he was discharged. So every day after that I drove back and forth between Willow Street and Women and Infants. If you know that hospital, you know parking over there fills up fast. One day I parked at a meter because I was there for 10 minutes. Then the doctor came in and told me his oxygen numbers dipped. 10 minutes became 4 hours. Caprio nodded once. "That explains 1-meter ticket." "There were 3 more days like that." Nina Mercer looked down at the citation log. "The record shows 2-meter violations and a no parking zone outside the neonatal entrance." Alina turned toward her. "Because my baby stopped feeding and the nurse told me to get inside." "You could have moved the vehicle after." "After?" Alina snapped. "After the doctor told me my son might need another tube. That after." Mateo startled. A thin cry escaped him. Alina immediately rocked him, shoulders shaking with the effort of not shaking. Judge Caprio raised a hand. "Let's lower the temperature." Then he did something that would matter later. He asked for dates and times. Specific ones. February 26th, March 1st, March 2nd, March 9th at 3:41 a.m. when the tow occurred. March 14th at 7:12 a.m. when the eviction notice was posted. March 27th, payday missed because the registration hold blocked her from taking a catering delivery side shift. April 2nd, the day of court. Every timestamp pinned the story down. Every detail made it harder to dismiss her as just another defendant spinning a tale. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever seen somebody get judged by a balance before anyone asked what caused it, because the next piece of evidence turned outrage into disbelief. Caprio tapped the tow record. You said your car was towed on March 9th at 3:41 a.m. Why were you at the hospital at that hour? Alina stared at him for a second. Because I got a call at 2:58 from NICU that Mateo's temperature dropped and they wanted me there. My mother was watching Sophia. I drove over in pajamas and a winter coat. I parked in the 20-minute emergency lane because there was no security guard outside and I thought I'd be in and out. Nina Mercer said, the tow report says the vehicle was unattended in a restricted emergency loading area. It was unattended because I was with my son. That area is clearly marked. Alina gave a bitter smile. So was the incubator. You could hear 3 people in the gallery inhale at the same time. It was a quotable line, sharp, painful, real, the kind of line that lives online after the video ends. Caprio didn't smile. He just asked the next question. Was there any interaction with the officer or tow crew? Yes. Was it recorded? Nina Mercer blinked. There may be body cam if PR. Providence police assisted. Frank Bianchi was already moving. He leaned toward the court monitor, made a call to records, and within minutes the mood in the room changed again. Because when a story sounds impossible but the footage exists, the paper stops leading and the truth starts walking into the room by itself. The monitor was rolled in. The courtroom lights dimmed slightly. Even the people waiting on their own cases forgot why they were there. The video opened in grainy pre-dawn blue. Body cam footage. Timestamp 03:38:44. The camera belonged to Officer Daniel Keene. Cold breath clouded the frame. Hospital lights reflected off wet pavement. A silver Toyota Corolla sat under the red emergency access only sign. Tow truck lights flashed amber against the brick wall. Then Alina appeared on screen. Same denim jacket, same panicked eyes, but this was 4 in the morning and she looked smaller somehow, almost transparent with fatigue. In one arm she carried a gray Medela breast pump cooler. In the other hand she was waving a hospital visitor band. Please, the video Alina was saying, please don't tow it, my baby is upstairs. Officer Keene's voice came through the speaker, calm but procedural. Ma'am, I need you to step back from the vehicle. I was inside for 20 minutes. The lane is for ambulance and emergency transfer access. My son is in emergency. Then something happened that made everyone in the courtroom lean in. A second voice entered the frame. A woman's voice, sharp, irritated, not police, not hospital staff. The camera turned and caught a woman in a camel coat holding a phone to her ear. Blonde hair in a tight knot, tall leather boots, structured black handbag. She was standing near the curb like she belonged there. That's the car, she said. Silver Corolla, apartment 3B. I told you she does this all the time. Alina's head snapped around. Denise. Now the room was fully awake. Caprio looked up from the screen. Who is Denise? Alina's face went pale. My property manager. A murmur rolled through the gallery. The video resumed. Denise Caro stepped closer into the body cam frame. Her voice was clipped, practiced, a tone that had likely scared people over late rent before breakfast many times. She's behind already, Denise said on the recording. If she loses the car maybe she'll start taking notices seriously. There it was. That one sentence. That one cold, thoughtless, devastating sentence. The sound in the courtroom wasn't a gasp this time. It was worse. It was disgust. Everyone in the room knew they had just crossed from unpaid citations into something much darker, because this wasn't just a mother making mistakes. This was a vulnerable tenant being watched, tracked, and squeezed at the worst moment of her life. Judge Caprio paused the video. He looked at Nina Mercer. Did the city know a private property manager initiated the complaint leading to this tow? Mercer was visibly thrown. The tow request appears to have gone through a non-emergency call route. I was not aware of the reporting party's identity. Elena whispered, almost to herself. She saw me at the hospital. Caprio's voice was quiet. Ms. Morales, did Ms. Caro know your newborn was in intensive care? Elena nodded without looking up. She texted me on March 1st asking when rent would be in. I sent her a photo of Mateo's wristband and the hospital room. Frank Bianchi asked, do you still have the text? Elena reached into the diaper bag, found a cracked iPhone 11 with a pink case peeling at the corners, and handed it over. Frank walked it to the clerk's desk, where the court monitor mirrored the thread on the screen. March 1, 11:22 a.m. Denise, rent was due yesterday. Need payment by Friday. Elena, I'm at Women and Infants. Mateo is in NICU. Please give me until my next shift. Photo attached. Baby wristband, incubator railing, date stamp visible. Denise, sorry to hear that. Lease still applies. Not cruel on its face, but paired with the body cam footage, the entire room heard it differently. Like this video, if you believe there's a difference between enforcing rules and hunting people when they're down, because that distinction was about to become the whole case. Caprio folded his hands again. Bring Ms. Caro into court. Frank Bianchi stepped into the hallway. 2 minutes later, he returned, followed by Denise Caro herself. She had been sitting in the back the entire time. Camel coat from the video, black Michael Kors tote, hair sleek, expression controlled but not calm, the kind of woman who was used to meetings, signatures, and people apologizing to her. She walked to the side lectern with an annoyed little lift of the chin, as if this were an inconvenience, not an exposure. Caprio looked at her over the file. State your name and role. Denise Caro, Regional Property Manager for Halpern Residential Holdings. You are the person seen on this footage. Yes. You told the officer, quote, if she lows, ease the car, maybe she'll start taking notices seriously. Did you say that? Denise took a breath. I may have said something to that effect out of frustration. A hiss ran through the gallery. Elena stared at the floor. Caprio kept his tone level. Why were you at Women and Infants Hospital at 3:41 in the morning on March 9th? Denise hesitated one beat too long. I was in the area. Frank Bianchi, who had spent 25 years watching people lie for a living, lifted an eyebrow. Caprio said nothing. Silence did the work for him. Finally, Denise added, I had been driving back from Warwick. At 3:41 in the morning. Yes. And you recognized your tenant's car in an emergency lane outside a hospital. Yes. And instead of contacting her directly, you called it in. It was illegally parked. Was that your concern? Caprio asked. Or was her overdue rent your concern? Now Denise looked irritated. Your Honor, with respect, I'm not on trial. The city cited a vehicle. I simply identified it. That sentence landed badly. Very badly. Because it sounded like what it was. Distance. Technicality. The language people use when they want the system to hurt someone without having to admit they aimed it. Elena suddenly lifted her head. Her voice was low, but it carried. She used to knock on the door before 7 in the morning, on purpose. She knew Sophia would wake up scared. Denise turned. That is absolutely false. Sophia started sleeping in her school clothes, Elena said. because she thought if we got put out before sunrise, at least she'd already be dressed. That was the outrage moment. Early, raw, undeniable. A woman in the second row put her hand over her mouth. A man waiting on a speeding ticket muttered, "Jesus." Even Nina Mercer stopped writing. Caprio held up a hand. "Ms. Morales, you'll have a chance. Ms. Caro, how much is the rental arrearage?" $1,840, plus late charges beginning tomorrow. Was there any communication about a payment plan? Several attempts, none completed. Alina laughed again, but now it sounded tired instead of sharp. Because every time I got close, another fee hit. Tow fee, storage fee, reinstatement fee. You people stack fees like firewood and then act surprised when someone burns. That was another line people would quote. Denise glanced at the baby like she wished he weren't there, complicating the optics. Then Frank Bianchi returned to the bench with a printout. "Your Honor, records confirms a second piece of related material. Apartment hallway surveillance from Willow Street, March 14th, when the demand notice was posted. Building has interior cameras." Caprio looked from Frank to Denise. "The building has surveillance." "Yes, for security." "Let's see it." That was the next cliffhanger, and you could feel tension roll through the courtroom again. Because body cam had already hurt Denise. If hallway video showed even one more thing out of line, this would stop being an uncomfortable appearance and become the kind of moment people clipped, replayed, and argued about for weeks. The screen switched to a fixed hallway view outside apartment 3B, timestamp 07/12/06. Narrow corridor, fluorescent lights, beige walls, a pink backpack hanging from a hook inside Alina's door, visible when the door opened a crack. Denise entered frame with a legal envelope and a phone. She slid the notice under the door. Then she did something nobody expected. She bent down, listened at the door for a second, and said very clearly, "You can ignore your phone, Alina, but the sheriff won't ignore mine." The room reacted immediately. But the real bomb wasn't even that. At 07/12/31, the door opened just 2 inches. Not enough to show Alina, just enough to show a child's face. Sophia. Big eyes, hair half braided, half undone, tiny hand gripping the edge of the door. "Is my mommy in trouble?" the little girl asked. Denise froze. She had not expected that camera to have audio this clean. You could see it on her face even through the slightly blurred footage. And then, in the most chilling 3 seconds of the morning, Denise answered, "That depends on whether your mommy starts acting like an adult." There are moments in a courtroom when truth doesn't need legal argument. It just detonates. The gallery erupted. Not shouting, not chaos, but a wave of whispers so furious they almost sounded louder than yelling. One older woman stood up without realizing it and sat back down only when the bailiff touched her shoulder. Alina covered her mouth. Tears finally came, sudden and hot, the kind that happen when humiliation gets replayed in public, and somehow that public is the first place anyone believes you. Judge Caprio let the video play for 2 more seconds. Sophia closed the door. Denise adjusted her coat and walked away. Then he turned the monitor off. "Ms. Caro," he said, voice still calm, "do you understand how that sounds?" Denise swallowed, for the first time all morning her confidence cracked. "I shouldn't have said that." "No," Caprio replied. "You should never have been the kind of person who would." That line landed like a gavel before the gavel ever moved. Drop a comment telling us whether that hallway footage would have changed your view of the whole situation. Because from this point on, the case stopped being about citations and became a referendum on conscience. Alina was crying quietly now, trying not to disturb Matteo, who had fallen asleep against her chest. Her shoulders shook. Her C-section scar still ached when she stood too long, and now she was standing in a courtroom under fluorescent lights being shown proof that her daughter's fear had been real all along. Caprio looked at her with the patience of someone who knew dignity sometimes comes back slowly. "Ms. Morales," he said, "how many children do you have?" "Two. Sophia is 6. Yes. And Mateo is 17 days. Yes. Who is helping you at home?" "My mother when she can. She cleans offices nights at the medical building on Plain Street. Her arthritis is bad. She still comes." "What about the father?" Elena looked down, not around. "By choice. By disappearance." That line hung in the air too. Caprio nodded once and made a note. "You said you missed work because of the vehicle hold. Explain that." Elena wiped under one eye with her sleeve. "I work mornings at Harbor Bean, 4:30 to 10, 3 days a week. I also do weekend catering deliveries for a company called Sorrento Events when they have weddings or church functions. They text you gigs. You need a valid registration and active app check-in to pick up trays and supplies. When the hold hit, I lost the Saturday job. That was $240 after tips. Do you have proof?" She reached into the diaper bag again, and it became clear that everything important in her life now lived in that bag. Bottles, wipes, a pacifier, a folded WIC form, a parking stub, 2 pay stubs, a discharge packet, 1 eviction notice, a little world of survival in black nylon with gold zippers. She handed over a printout from Sorrento Events, showing assignment canceled due to license verification issue. Then Frank Bianchi looked through the hospital paperwork and paused. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "there's also a letter here from Women and Infants." Caprio lifted his eyes. "Read it." Frank unfolded the paper. It was on hospital letterhead, signed by Dr. Lee Rosen, Neonatal Intensive Care Unit. "To whom it may concern, this letter confirms that infant Mateo Morales was admitted to the NICU on February 26, 2026, due to respiratory distress and feeding instability associated with late preterm birth at 35 weeks. Mother Elena Morales was present for multiple overnight and emergency visits, including March 2 and March 9, and was encouraged by staff to remain available for skin-to-skin regulation and feeding support. Her presence was medically beneficial. The room was so quiet you could hear Mateo breathe." Frank continued. "Due to fluctuating oxygen saturation, family access during these episodes was time-sensitive. We appreciate any reasonable accommodation made for this patient's caregivers during the period of hospitalization." Reasonable accommodation. That phrase hit hard because it sounded so professional, so restrained, so much gentler than the reality it described. A doctor had essentially written, this mother was trying to keep her baby alive. Nina Mercer removed her glasses and set them down. "Your Honor," she said carefully, "the city is not unsympathetic, but meter laws and tow zone restrictions exist for public safety. The question is whether the court has authority to waive all assessed amounts." Caprio nodded, "A fair question." Then he looked at Elena again. "Ms. Morales, I need to ask this directly. Why didn't you come to court earlier? Why let the fees build?" That was the question the internet always asks. Why didn't she do this sooner? Why didn't she call? Why didn't she ask? Why didn't she fix it before it became dramatic enough for strangers to care? Elena's answer changed the room again. "Because being poor takes all day," she said. No theatrics, no shouting, just that sentence. Every hour was already owned by something. Hospital, my daughter, pumping, riding the bus when the car was gone, calling my manager, sitting on hold, trying not to cry in front of Sophia. I kept telling myself I'd handle it tomorrow. Then tomorrow came with another fee. That was shareable quote number 4, and maybe the strongest one yet. Caprio stared at her for a long moment. "Being poor takes all day," he repeated softly, as if he wanted every person in that room to hear the truth of it twice. Then Frank Bianchi whispered something to the clerk. The clerk nodded, typed quickly, and handed Frank a new sheet. Frank's face tightened. Your Honor, there is one more item tied to Willow Street. What is it? A code inspection complaint F. Filed March 10th. Mold allegation in apartment 3B status marked unresolved. Now the story had another turn. Caprio looked at Denise. There's a mold complaint. Denise straightened. Minor bathroom discoloration, maintenance scheduled. Alina laughed through tears. Minor. Sophia's inhaler is on my kitchen table because of your minor. Nina Mercer turned to Alina. Your daughter has asthma. Yes. Has a doctor linked it to the apartment? Alina nodded. Pediatrician said dampness doesn't help. Want the note? I got notes for everything. That's all poor people do, collect notes. The gallery murmured again. Nobody missed the truth in that either. Notes for school, notes for work, notes for aid, notes for sickness, notes to prove you're suffering enough to deserve delay. Like this video, if you've ever had to prove a hardship to someone who treated your life like an inconvenience, because there was still one witness nobody expected to hear from. Judge Caprio asked the clerk to call Alina's mother, listed on the emergency contact form as Rosa Morales. 10 minutes later, a small woman in a maroon fleece entered the courtroom, breathing hard, clutching a canvas tote and an umbrella dripping onto the tile. She looked older than 58 and younger than surrender. Her left wrist wore a cheap drugstore brace. Her shoes were the sensible kind that say your feet hurt but the day goes on anyway. She took the stand and swore in. Ms. Morales, Caprio said kindly, you are Alina's mother. Yes, Your Honor. Can you tell me what you observed over the last month? Rosa glanced at Alina, then at the baby, and her face folded in on itself for 1 second before she regained control. I watched my granddaughter while Alina was in the hospital, Rosa said in accented but steady English. I took buses when I could. Alina came home smelling like sanitizer and coffee and tears. She pumped milk in my kitchen at 2 in the morning. She would sleep sitting up because if she lay flat the surgery hurt. The gallery listened without moving. Rosa continued, my granddaughter Sophia stopped asking if Mateo was coming home. She started asking if they were. That is different. Even Caprio's pen paused. Did you interact with the property manager? He asked. Yes. How? She came to the apartment on March 7th. I opened the door. She said, tell your daughter sympathy doesn't pay utilities. I told her my grandson was in intensive care. She said, then she should find family with better timing. Now Denise looked genuinely alarmed. That is not what I said. Rosa turned toward her, small woman, trembling hand, voice like wire. You think because I speak soft I remember soft. I remember exact. That line sent a ripple through the room. Caprio let the silence sit. Then he said, Ms. Caro, if you dispute multiple statements, I would advise you to do so carefully. Denise's lawyer should have been there. She did not have one. That was beginning to show. Then another unexpected thing happened. Officer Daniel Keene, the same officer from the body cam footage, entered the courtroom from the side. He had been called back by records after seeing the request. Tall, tired eyes, patrol uniform still damp at the shoulders from the rain. He removed his cap and stood near the witness area. Caprio nodded to him. Officer, thank you for returning. You were on the March 9th tow assist. Yes, Your Honor. Did Ms. Morales appear intoxicated, disorderly, or evasive? No, sir. What did she tell you? That her baby was in NICU and she rushed in. She was upset. She kept saying she needed 10 minutes. Why was the tow completed? Officer Keene shifted his weight. Because dispatch coded the location as emergency lane obstruction with repeat offender notation from complainant. Nina Mercer looked up sharply. Repeat offender notation. Yes, ma'am. Where did that come from? Keene glanced at Denise, then back at the bench. I assumed from the complainant. Denise immediately said, "I never used those words." Keene didn't get defensive. He just replied with the deadly calm of someone used to paperwork. "Ma'am, I wrote what I was told over a recorded line." Another twist. Another quiet explosion. Caprio leaned forward. "Can that call be retrieved?" Frank Bianchi answered, "Dispatch archives 90 days. I can request it." Requested. The courtroom had fully transformed now. What started as unpaid citations had turned into a live unraveling of credibility, and every new layer made Alina's earlier edge make more sense. She had come in sounding defensive because she had been defending her family against a machine that kept arriving dressed as procedure. When the dispatch audio arrived 15 minutes later, nobody even pretended not to care. The speaker crackled. March 9th, 03:31. Female caller identified the location, vehicle make, plate, and unit number of the tenant. Then came the key words, clear enough that Denise closed her eyes before the sentence even finished. "This is not the first time," the voice said. "She abandons that car everywhere, and frankly, she's unstable." Unstable. There it was. The kind of word that changes how police respond. The kind of word that can turn a struggling mother into a problem before anyone sees her face. Alina looked stunned, not because she hadn't lived it, but because now it was out loud, undeniable on a courtroom speaker. Caprio clicked the audio off. "Ms. Caro, did you characterize her as unstable?" Denise's composure finally broke. "I was frustrated. She was months behind. I was dealing with complaints. I shouldn't have said it like that." "How should you have said it?" Denise opened her mouth, then closed it. Caprio answered for her. "You should have said a newborn's mother was inside a hospital." That was quote number 5, and people in the gallery knew they were hearing the line that would end up clipped all over social media before the day was over. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that one word said in frustration can become a weapon in the wrong system, because the next revelation would force even the hardest person in that room to look inward. For the first time since Alina entered, Caprio turned some of the scrutiny back to her. "Ms. Morales, I'm going to be fair to you too. Did you ignore notices? Did you miss rent before this month?" Alina hesitated. Truth had become the currency of the room. You could feel she understood that now. "Yes." "How often?" "Twice last year. Late, not missed. And once in January I paid in 2 parts." "Did you communicate?" Sometimes I shut down." "Why?" "Because every call turned into shame." That line didn't excuse anything. It explained it. That difference matters. Caprio nodded. "So you weren't perfect?" "No," Alina said. "I was drowning. That's not the same, but it's not pretty either." There, the humility shift, the moment of realization, not dramatic, honest. Caprio said, "No one in this room needs you to be perfect. They need you to be accountable and reachable." Alina looked up. "I can do that." It was the first time she sounded like she believed maybe there was something left to save. Then Nina Mercer surprised everyone. "Your Honor," she said, standing, "in light of the hospital letter, the body cam, and the complainant's role, the city is prepared to waive all penalties beyond the base violations pending the court's discretion. I would also support vacating the registration hold." That was not full victory, but it was movement. And movement in a case like this feels like oxygen. The gallery reacted with a low wave of approval, not celebration, relief. Caprio held up a hand. "We're not done." Because he knew what everyone else was starting to realize. Waiving some parking penalties would help, but it would not stop tomorrow's eviction. And if the court ended on a partial win while a newborn still risked sleeping in a car seat in the back of a Corolla, the room would remember the technical success and the moral failure. Frank Bianchi leaned in. "Your Honor, There is also a request in the inbox from a hospital social worker named Tasha Green. She says she has direct knowledge relevant to housing. Bring her in. That was the next cliffhanger. The room had already seen body cam, hallway surveillance, dispatch audio, doctor's letter, mother's testimony. And now a hospital social worker was about to enter with something relevant to housing. You could feel people sit straighter. Tasha Green arrived 3 minutes later in dark scrubs under a winter coat, badge clipped at her chest, sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. She looked like someone who had skipped lunch for the last 5 years. Focused eyes, messy bun, a manila folder under one arm thick with documents. She was sworn in. "Ms. Green," Caprio said, "what is your role?" "I'm a neonatal family support social worker at Women and Infants. I worked with Ms. Morales during Mateo's NICU stay." "Do you have information about her housing situation?" "Yes, Your Honor. On March 11th, Ms. Morales disclosed active eviction risk connected to temporary lost income and transportation disruption. I contacted the property management office listed on her lease and requested hardship accommodation pending emergency family assistance." "Who answered?" Tasha looked at Denise, Ms. Caro. The courtroom stiffened again. "What was the response?" Caprio asked. Tasha opened the folder and removed a printed email thread. "I sent an email at 2:14 p.m. offering written verification from the NICU and advising that St. Joseph Family Support Fund might cover up to 2 months, arrears if management would pause further action for 5 business days. At 2:28 p.m. I received a reply." She handed the paper to Frank, who passed copies to the bench and counsel. Caprio read silently for a few seconds. His eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Then he said, "Read it aloud." Tasha did. From Denise Caro, quote, "We are not a charity ward. If your client has money available, she can use it after the unit is vacated. We do not suspend procedures for personal drama." End quote. The courtroom reacted harder than at any point so far. Gasps, a sharp whispered "wow." Someone in the back said, "Unbelievable." Denise visibly flushed. That email was taken out of context. Tasha didn't even look at her. There are only 2 lines. It had very little context to remove. That was a killer line. The kind that gets replayed in clips with comments pouring in under it. Caprio set the email down with unusual care. "Was the support fund approved?" Tasha nodded. "Yes. Approved March 12th for up to $1,200, contingent on management's agreement to pause filing and accept direct payment. We received no cooperation, so the funds were redirected to another family on March 19th. Everything changed again. Because now the room knew this was not merely a harsh property manager enforcing a lease. This was a property manager who had actively blocked relief that could have kept a mother and 2 children housed. Elena closed her eyes. "I never knew that." Tasha looked at her with visible pain. "I left 2 voicemails and 1 message with the leasing line. I thought they had told you." Denise's voice sharpened. It was not a guaranteed full cure of the balance. "No," Tasha replied, finally turning toward her. "It was a guaranteed start, which is more than you offered. Like this video, if you believe a start matters when someone is hanging by a thread, because the courtroom had reached that point where nobody was just watching a case anymore. They were watching character reveal itself under pressure." Judge Caprio took a long breath. "Ms. Caro," he said, "you rejected emergency neonatal family assistance." Denise clasped her hands tighter. "The owner's policy discourages informal payment disruptions. Partial assistance often delays inevitable turnover." Turnover. That one word made several people audibly groan. To Denise, apartment 3B was a unit. To Elena, it was the only place her daughter knew how to call home. Caprio said, Do you understand why that language sounds monstrous in this context? Denise stared straight ahead. I understand it sounds bad. No, he corrected her, it sounds true. That line hit like thunder. Now even Nina Mercer looked away. Then came the confrontation building toward the 6,000-word peak. You could feel it. Every thread was now in one place. The city's tickets, the landlord's pressure, the baby's medical crisis, the missed work, the ignored aid, the child frightened behind a half-open apartment door. Caprio asked for the owner. Frank Bianchi made the call. 7 minutes later, Victor Halpern arrived. If Denise represented institutional coldness in email form, Victor represented it in expensive tailoring. Mid-50s, charcoal Brooks Brothers coat, blue tie, Rolex peeking under the cuff. He entered with the measured annoyance of a man who had never expected his morning to involve a public reckoning. He was not rude. That almost made it worse. He was professionally detached. Your Honor, he said, taking the side lectern. I'm Victor Halpern, principal of Halpern Residential Holdings. You employ Ms. Caro? Yes. Did you authorize the rejection of emergency family relief for Ms. Morales? Victor adjusted his cuff. I was not personally aware of this tenant file until an hour ago. Are Ms. Caro's actions consistent with company policy? Our policy prioritizes lease enforcement and consistent administration across units. Caprio tilted his head. Consistent administration. Is that what you call threatening a mother outside a neonatal ward? Victor's jaw flexed. I wouldn't call it that, no. But you wouldn't call it unacceptable either. Victor hesitated. Fatal mistake. Your Honor, property management involves difficult decisions. If exceptions are made emotionally, we create unfairness for other tenants who pay on time. That argument is not unusual. It is the kind of argument that sounds logical until you place it next to a 17-day-old infant and a mother with a hospital wristband. Caprio's reply came slowly, each word placed exactly where it needed to land. Sir, fairness without context is how cruelty learns to wear a tie. That was maybe the strongest line of the day. A line you could print on a poster. A line that would absolutely go viral. Victor inhaled. I am not cruel. No one wakes up using that word for themselves, Caprio said. That's why courts exist. At that point, the room knew they were witnessing something larger than a normal case. This was the moral center of the story, the ultimate confrontation beginning to crest. Elena shifted Mateo and spoke directly to Victor for the first time. Her voice was not angry now. That made it hit harder. I'm not asking you to love me, she said. I'm asking you not to make my kids age homeless because my son had trouble breathing. Victor looked at her, really looked, not at the file, not at the balance, at her, at the blanket, at the tiny face tucked into it. And yet he still said, the balance remains. The gallery reacted with pure disbelief. That was the shock moment, because everyone kept hoping some sliver of humanity would arrive automatically once the facts were visible. When it didn't, the disappointment became its own emotional peak. Caprio leaned back and folded his hands again. When he did that, people got very quiet. I cannot run your buildings, he said to Victor. I cannot order you to become a better man, but I can make a legal record of what happened here. I can decide the matters before me, and I can say in a courtroom full of witnesses that some business decisions are indictments of character. No one moved. Then he turned to Nina Mercer. What is the maximum lawful adjustment available on these citations in light of emergency circumstances, witness evidence, and complainant misconduct? Mercer answered quickly now. The court may dismiss the meter citations in the interest of justice, void the tow administrative penalties if the initiating complaint is materially misleading, and release the registration hold immediately. Can the tow charge itself be rescinded? with a finding that the tow was precipitated by bad faith information. Yes. Caprio nodded. He looked at Alina. Ms. Morales, here is what this court can do. It can dismiss every citation tied to March 9th and the hospital-related meter events. It can release your registration hold today. It can order reimbursement of tow storage fees. That is within my power. Alina closed her eyes and started crying again, harder now. But Caprio hadn't finished. What this court cannot do, he continued, is directly stop a private eviction in another venue. But I will not send you out of this courtroom with a legal win and a practical tragedy if I can help it. That sentence changed the air again. Because now hope entered the room in a different form, not sentiment, action. Frank Bianchi stepped toward the bench with a folded note. Caprio read it, then looked up at Tasha Green. Ms. Green, is there any fund still available if management agrees today? Tasha looked startled. There may be. I would need to call. The original allotment was redirected, but the postpartum emergency reserve reopens monthly. Call. That was the next cliffhanger. If money could still be secured before noon, the eviction clock might actually be interrupted. If not, then all the compassion in the room risked ending at the courthouse door. Share this with someone who needs to see that justice isn't just a speech. It's what happens when people in a room refuse to stop at the speech. Because the next 10 minutes determined whether this story would end in applause or with a mother walking back into the rain. Tasha stepped into the hall with her phone. The room waited. Caprio used the silence. He turned to Alina. If the rent gap can be partially bridged, can you maintain forward payments? Yes. How? I'm back at Harbor Bean Monday. My manager held 2 shifts. My cousin Maribel can watch Mateo after April 15th when her classes change. I also got approved for SNAP last week, which helps groceries. And if the car hold is lifted, Sorrento said I can take Sunday events again. Do you have any savings? Alina gave a sad little laugh. I have $7 and some quarters in a coffee tin. Any tax refund pending? She blinked. State refund, maybe $600. Any church or family support? My mother gives me what she can even when I tell her not to. Rosa immediately said, I can do $200 by next Friday. Alina turned, Ma. Rosa held up her hand. For my grandchildren, yes. That was compassion moment number 1. And it mattered because it came from someone who clearly did not have $200 to spare. Then something else happened. Officer Daniel Keene stepped forward, cleared his throat, and asked permission to speak. Caprio gave it. I know it's unusual, Your Honor, he said. But after watching this and hearing the dispatch audio, I'd like the record to reflect that if I had known the full circumstances, I would have exercised discretion differently. Nina Mercer nodded. The city appreciates the officer's candor. Keene continued, looking at Alina. I'm sorry for my part in how that night went. The apology was small, professional, and completely genuine. It landed. Alina nodded, tears still on her face. Thank you. That was the forgiveness seed being planted, long before the full twist arrived. Tasha returned from the hallway breathing quickly, phone still in hand. I reached the fund director, she said. There is an emergency reserve available due to a cancellation. Up to $1,400 can be pledged today if the property owner agrees in writing to halt all immediate dispossess action for 30 days. And accept direct payment by wire before 5 p.m. The room almost lifted off the floor. Caprio looked at Victor. You heard her. Victor's expression remained measured, but now there was pressure behind his eyes. That still leaves a balance. How much? Caprio asked. Denise answered before he could. $440 plus current month utilities. Frank Bianchi looked down at his notes. Not if late fees are waived. Victor turned slightly toward Denise. and that one look told everyone the power dynamic had shifted. Caprio said, "Would your company waive late fees in light of the documented medical emergency and your manager's misconduct?" Victor said nothing. Caprio did not rescue him with more words. The room just waited. This was the choice moment, clear, public, inescapable. Finally, Victor said, "I would need assurance of future payment." Alina answered before Caprio could, "You'll get it." Victor looked at her. "That's what everyone says." Alina straightened, and for the first time that morning she sounded not scared, not defensive, but grounded. "No," she said. "Everyone says a lot of things. I'm the one who drove to the hospital after a C-section because my son needed my skin to help him breathe. I'm the one who kept my daughter in school while notices came under the door. I'm the one standing here with every mistake attached to my name and still not lying to you. So don't put me in a pile with everyone." The courtroom went dead still. That was her breakthrough speech, her full arrival as the moral center of the story. Victor looked at her for a long second, the kind of second in which people decide who they are going to be after this. Then Denise, sensing the shift, made one last disastrous attempt at control. Even if management agreed, there's still the matter of habitual instability. Other tenants have complained. Caprio's head turned slowly toward her. Habitual instability. Denise pressed on. Noise, visitors, late-night movement, emotional episodes. Tasha Green cut in. She was pumping breast milk every 3 hours and traveling to NICU. Rosa said, "That was movement." Officer Keene said, "And your own complaint weaponized that." The gallery muttered sharply. Caprio raised a hand. "Enough." Then he delivered the line that would become the centerpiece of every clip uploaded that afternoon. "If the law can't see the baby in your arms," he said, looking first at Denise and then at Victor, "then the court has to." Nobody breathed. He continued, "Poverty is not a character flaw. Medical crisis is not misconduct. And no child should lose her home because adults with options chose paperwork over decency." There were tears now all over the room, quiet ones, controlled ones, the kind people wipe fast because they didn't come to court expecting to feel anything. That should have been the climax. But the story still had one more twist. Because at roughly the 7,000-word mark, when everyone thought the path was finally clear, Frank Bianchi received one more document by email from Halpern Residential's internal office. It had been sent anonymously from a company employee who heard the hearing was underway. Frank printed it, scanned it, and brought it to the bench. Caprio read the first page, then the second, and his face changed. "Mr. Halpern," he said, "did you know your company received a one-time charitable payment on March 15th in the amount of $600 from St. Agnes Parish, earmarked specifically for tenant Alina Morales?" Victor frowned. "I was not aware of that." Denise went rigid. Caprio held up the ledger. "It appears the payment was deposited into a general arrears suspense account and not applied to her unit." The gallery erupted louder than at any earlier point. Because now the room wasn't just seeing cruelty, it was seeing obstruction. Denise spoke too quickly. That was an internal accounting issue. Frank Bianchi answered before Caprio did. An issue that somehow moved aid away from the tenant it was intended for while maintaining eviction status. Victor turned fully toward Denise. "Did that happen?" Denise's composure was gone now. It was being reviewed. "Did it happen?" "Yes, but—" Victor closed his eyes briefly. It was not dramatic. That made it feel more real. A man realizing in public that the system he trusted was filthier than he had allowed himself to know. Everything changed again. The gallery knew it, Tasha knew it, Nina Mercer knew it, Alina knew it. Because now Victor Halpern had a new problem. He was no longer just defending policy. He was facing evidence that his own office had mishandled money intended to keep a newborn's family housed. Caprio set the paper down. "Mr. Halpern," he said, "you now have a choice. You can spend the next month explaining accounting irregularities, discriminatory dispatch language, and documented rejection of neonatal hardship aid in every forum that follows from this record. Or you can do what should have been done before sunrise weeks ago." Victor's face had lost color. For the first time, he looked like a man and not a company. "What exactly are you asking?" he said. "I'm not asking," Caprio replied. "I'm showing you the last decent exit." That line tore through the courtroom like electricity. Like this video, if you believe some people only discover their conscience when there are witnesses. Because what Victor did next decided whether this would be remembered as a takedown or a transformation. Victor turned toward Elena fully. When he spoke, the edge in his voice was gone. "Ms. Morales," he said, "I was not personally aware of the hospital fund email or the parish payment. I should have been. That is on me." Denise stared at him, stunned. He continued, "Effective today, the $600 from St. Agnes will be applied to your balance. Late fees are waived. If the hospital reserve sends $1,400 by 5, your arrears are cured through this month. Your tenancy remains in place. No eviction filing tomorrow." The room exploded. Not chaos, release. People exhaled, cried, clapped once before catching themselves in a courtroom. Rosa sat down hard and covered her face. Tasha Green let out a breath that sounded like she'd been holding it for a week. Elena didn't move. Caprio looked at her gently. "Ms. Morales, did you hear him?" She nodded, but she looked almost disoriented. "I heard him. I just don't know if my body believes him yet." That line might have been the most human line of the whole story. Victor swallowed. "You have my word." Elena looked at him for a long second, then said something nobody expected. "I don't want your humiliation," she said. "I want my kids to sleep in their beds." There it was. The forgiveness twist. Not full absolution. Not pretending harm hadn't happened. Just refusing revenge when revenge was suddenly available. That moved the room more than anger ever could have. Caprio nodded slowly. "Mercy is not the opposite of justice," he said. "It is what proves you understood the facts." Quote number 7, another one for the highlight reels. Then he addressed Denise. "Ms. Caro, you will provide written correction of Ms. Morales's account before noon. You will also provide all records of aid received and not applied. Whether your employer continues your role is not for this court to decide. But let the record reflect that your conduct toward this family was callous, coercive, and beneath the obligations of anyone entrusted with housing." Denise looked shattered now, not because someone yelled at her, because the language was precise, public, and permanent. Victor spoke quietly. "Frankly, Your Honor, it won't continue." He didn't look at Denise when he said it. There was no dramatic firing scene, no television theatrics, just one sentence, cold, final. And somehow that felt even more real. Caprio returned to the citations. "On the municipal matters," he said, voice now formal, "the court finds that the hospital-related meter citations and the March 9th tow were inextricably tied to a neonatal medical emergency and materially influenced by misleading complainant information. In the interest of justice, all assessed fines, fees, penalties, and registration holds are dismissed and vacated. Tow and storage charges are ordered refunded within 30 days. The gavel came down. One crack. Sharp, clean. Justice served. The room broke into tears again. But Caprio still wasn't done. "Clerk will provide Ms. Morales direct contact for the city ombudsman, code enforcement reinspection of apartment 3B within 72 hours, and family resource services. Ms. Green, remain with her after court. Officer Keene, thank you. Mr. Halpern, Your office will confirm compliance by close of business. Then he looked at Alina and softened. Take your children home. That was the resolution moment, the sentence everyone would remember. Take your children home. No one in that courtroom would ever forget how she looked when he said it. Her knees almost gave out. Rosa was beside her in 2 seconds. Frank Bianchi came around the rail to steady a chair without making a show of it. Tasha took the diaper bag. Mateo slept through history. The gallery started clapping before anyone could stop it. And for once, Caprio let it happen for 3 full seconds. 3 seconds that felt like a release valve for the whole city. Share this with someone who still believes one courtroom moment can restore faith in people. Because what happened after the hearing may have been even more powerful than what happened inside it. By 1:40 that afternoon, a local court observer had posted a 90-second clip online. Not the whole hearing, just the body cam sentence, the hallway footage, and Judge Caprio saying, "If the law can't see the baby in your arms, then the court has to." Within 2 hours, it crossed 800,000 views. By dinner, it was everywhere. Providence pages, justice channels, mom forums, legal commentary accounts, radio segments, national reaction threads. People who had never heard of Willow Street suddenly knew the name Alina Morales. People who had been evicted, threatened, towed, ignored, billed, delayed, and talked down to were sharing the clip with captions like, "This is what being seen feels like." By midnight, it was over 6 million views. And the comments told their own story. "I cried at work watching this. That property manager talked to a child like that. Being poor takes all day is the truest thing I've heard in years." Judge Caprio didn't just dismiss a ticket, he dismissed a machine. The next morning, reporters stood outside the courthouse in the same rain. Harbor Bean posted a handwritten sign near the register, "We are proud of Alina." St. Agnes Parish announced it was launching a neonatal housing emergency fund in partnership with women and infants. The city's housing ombudsman issued a statement about improving referral systems between courts and medical social workers. Even people who argued online about rules being rules found themselves pausing when the hallway clip of little Sophia asking, "Is my mommy in trouble?" appeared on screen. Because some moments cut through ideology. A child's voice can do that. A month later, on May 7, 2026, Alina returned to the courthouse voluntarily. Not as a defendant. As an update. She wore a clean green blouse under the same denim jacket. The jacket mattered. It told the truth of the gap between surviving and suddenly becoming wealthy. Her hair was neatly braided. Mateo, now 7 weeks older, had more color in his cheeks. Sophia stood beside her in a yellow raincoat decorated with tiny strawberries, clutching a folded drawing. Rosa came too, smiling for the first time without that tight, worried look around her eyes. Judge Caprio recognized them immediately. "How's the family?" he asked. Alina smiled, and the whole courtroom felt the difference. "We're home," she said. That was all it took. But she kept going. The hospital fund came through that day. St. Agnes reapplied the 600. My job gave me extra shifts. Sorrento put me back on weekend work. Code enforcement came and cited the bathroom ceiling and window leak. Repairs got done. Sophia hasn't used her inhaler in 9 days. The courtroom actually applauded that. Then Sophia stepped forward with her folded paper. Frank Bianchi took it and handed it to the bench. It was a child's drawing in crayon. A judge in a black robe, a baby in a blue blanket, a little girl by a door, and a big yellow house with smoke coming from the chimney. Across the top, in careful, uneven letters, she had written, "Thank you for letting my brother come home to our house." People in the courtroom started crying all over again. Caprio put his hand over his heart for a second. He did not pretend it didn't affect him. "Tell Sophia," he said softly, "she did the best legal filing I've seen all year." Even Frank Bianchi laughed. That clip went viral too. But the story still had one more layer, the one that turned it from emotional to unforgettable. 3 months after the hearing in July, a letter arrived at the courthouse addressed personally to Judge Caprio. It was handwritten in blue ink on lined paper, folded neatly, and the return address read 48 Willow Street, Apt. 3B. Frank Bianchi brought it into chambers. Caprio read it, then asked permission to share portions publicly because he thought people needed to hear what happened after cameras left. This is what the letter said. Dear Judge Caprio, I wanted to write instead of just say thank you because thank you is too short for what happened that day. Before court, I thought I was coming in to lose. Not just lose money, lose respect, lose my car, lose my apartment, lose the little piece of myself that still thought maybe if I explained things clearly enough someone would care. I came in hard because soft had not worked for me in a long time. That sentence alone told you how much she had changed. She understood herself better now.